Mediation is one of the three main processes to conduct your divorce in Connecticut. That's usually what we mean when we say mediation. So you might decide to have a litigated divorce, you might decide to have a collaborative divorce, or you might mediate your divorce. One thing I always like to mention is there's a different kind of mediation in Connecticut that's also really useful and can be really profoundly productive for a lot of couples. And that's when you do a mediation towards the end of a litigated divorce, kind of after discovery and before trial. There's a point where your attorney might suggest bringing in a mediator to see if you can sit and resolve the outstanding issues and avoid a trial that way. In many cases, it resolves all of the issues, and in some cases, it at least narrows them and takes some things off the table, and you only have to ask a judge to decide on the things that you really can't agree on, not the things that you're able to reach an agreement on when you tried really hard and had the benefit of an experienced mediator. So those are the two main versions of mediation in Connecticut, the kind that does your divorce process entirely, and then a tool that we use to resolve divorces that are in the litigation process before they wind up in a trial. When a couple chooses mediation and they are the right candidates for mediation, mediation can have a lot of benefits. It can happen on your schedule. In the case of my office, if we serve as the mediator, it can happen remotely. So you can conduct, as long as you're in a private location, you can conduct your mediation sessions via Zoom, which can be very convenient for a lot of people. They really like that. The other thing is the mediation can work on your own timeline. It can be faster or slower than the court process, depending on what your preference is. You should never rush a mediation, but it can accommodate your schedule and go as fast or as slowly as the two of you choose. So there's one thing that's a little bit different about mediation in the divorce context in Connecticut than in other states. And this is something that can be confusing to people because you might hear about mediation generally from the media covering a celebrity who got divorced or how something worked for your family member who is in Massachusetts or New York. Even though there are neighbors here in Connecticut, mediation can be a very different thing. So in Connecticut, mediation generally refers to two things. It refers to the process for your entire divorce. We decided to mediate our divorce. Or it can refer to a tool that we use to help litigations resolve and avoid a full trial. Those are the two main things, the two main versions of divorce mediation in Connecticut. But in other states, there's actually a formal stage embedded into the court's process for a divorce. So a traditional litigated divorce, in some states, there'll be a stage called mediation where the parties are required to go at least attempt to resolve their case with a mediator. That's not how things work in Connecticut. With Connecticut, mediation's always optional, whether it's the process you pick for your entire divorce or whether it's the tool to resolve your litigation. In both of those situations, both spouses need to agree to opt into mediation. And that's what makes Connecticut's views on divorce mediation and how we approach it a little bit different than a lot of other states. So I've talked a lot about how there are benefits for mediation when you and your spouse are good candidates for mediation. So let's talk a little bit about what tends to make people good candidates. Now, the first thing that I want you to think about is I want you to meet with an attorney who practices in all modalities of divorce. So in Connecticut, that's traditional litigated divorce, which doesn't necessarily mean it's high conflict. It's collaborative divorce, and it's divorce mediation. When you're working with a law firm that does all of those things, they can give you really good insights based on your specific situation, which of those paths might be the best for you. Now, first up, to do a mediation or collaborative divorce, both spouses have to agree to it. So you're not good candidates if you aren't both into it. You must be into it. All right, so let's get a little nitty gritty. Say both of you are into it and your lawyer thinks it's a good idea. What tends to make it a good idea? Well, if you're both open and honest, if you trust that you have a reasonable sense of all of the assets of your spouse, and that you trust that your spouse is forthcoming, that they'll share things. If there isn't open honesty in a mediation or any fear that people aren't going to be candid, it's probably not going to be the best process for you. But if you are open and honest, that's a good sign that mediation will work for you. Another thing that makes people better candidates for mediation is generally when they both have equal comfort speaking up. So at a mediation in Connecticut, it's generally the two spouses and the mediator in the room together, and their attorneys aren't present. That's generally the way that mediation as a process for your divorce works. So if you're not comfortable being in a room with your spouse and the mediator and being able to share what you're thinking and feeling, and both being able to listen to your spouse and also share your views, mediation might not be the best approach for you. Something like litigation or collaborative law might be a better fit. Again, this is why I prefer that people meet with a law firm that practices in all three approaches to divorce before they make their decision of how to proceed. Because what we really want to make sure we do is set you up for success. So for example, say you have a couple that's amicable. They want to resolve their divorce out of court. They want to resolve it what I'll call conveniently on their own schedule, perhaps using tools like Zoom or Teams instead of always being at a table, physically at a table together. That works with a lot of people's schedules, things like that. If those things are true, and also there's no fear that someone is going to hide something, then that tends to suggest that mediation is an option that you'll really want to talk about with your lawyer. Who's not a good candidate for mediation? Well, couples, when one person doesn't want to mediate, those are a no-go. They are not good candidates for mediation. It takes two in a mediation and divorce in Connecticut or in a collaborative divorce in Connecticut. Both people need to be willing to go forward. So if both people aren't interested in the process, it's not going to be a go for a mediation. What other things tend to result in not greatest mediations or mediations that actually fall apart? Well, when one person isn't motivated to move forward with the mediation. So in that situation, they may have agreed to do the mediation, but they aren't engaged in it. They drag their feet on providing financial information. They drag their feet on scheduling. They might show up to the mediation and be non-participatory, just sort of sit back. We really need two fully engaged people to have a successful mediation. Another situation that makes people not great candidates for mediation is when someone is trying to hide something from their spouse. So they might think that mediation will allow them to sort of run the table and get what they want. That's not a good candidate for mediation. You want to make sure that people that are opting into mediation are fully engaged in the process and fully committed to reaching a fair settlement. It shouldn't be used as a tool to overwhelm one spouse. That's not a good candidate for mediation. I also think that to be good candidates for mediation, you should be willing to engage your own independent review counsel. So review counsel is a lawyer who is your lawyer who can give you legal advice. A mediator who might be a lawyer for sure, that's a good idea, isn't giving either party legal advice. They're just giving information. So you want to make sure that both spouses have the benefit of a lawyer on the side who can give them advice about what decisions they're making, so that when they enter into this settlement and mediation, they do so with eyes wide open. They know what they're agreeing to. Mediation Review Counsel's job, it's not to blow up the mediation, it's to support the mediation. But in doing so, make sure that that review counsel's client understands what they're agreeing to. If you have any questions about mediation, our lawyers at Freed Marcroft serve both as divorce mediators and as review counsel that will give you independent advice while you're mediating so that you really know what you're agreeing to and what the repercussions of it down the line might be. Eyes wide open on the review counsel. Mediation is an important thing to learn about in Connecticut if it's something that you are considering or your spouse has raised as a possibility. If you'd like to know, give us a call.